There is a room beneath Buckingham Palace that most people will never see. It is not a gallery. It is not a display case. It is a converted World War II air raid shelter, buried underground, where the British monarchy keeps its most extraordinary secrets. In that room, on shelves lined with velvet, sit hundreds of pieces of jewelry. Tiaras, chokers, brooches, rings. Some are worn regularly, cycling through the wrists and throats of queens and princesses at state banquets and diplomatic receptions. But many, perhaps most, are simply waiting. They wait in the dark. They wait for decades. Some wait for a century. They are the pieces that were deemed too heavy, too old-fashioned, too ugly, too foreign, or simply too inconvenient. Too deeply associated with a dead era. Too much trouble for anyone to bother reviving. The monarchy is nothing if not a prisoner of its own tradition, and tradition, more often than not, means leaving perfectly extraordinary things alone. Then, in 1981, a 19-year-old from a good family walked through the front door of the palace, and the vault was never the same again. This is the story of the jewels no one wanted, the pieces that sat in boxes and drawers, gathering dust for generations. The brooches considered too stiff for modern wear. The necklaces thought too aggressive for a queen's throat. The crosses too theatrical, the rings too bold, the pendants too associated with long-dead ceremony. This is the story of what happens when a young woman who didn't know the rules, or more accurately, who knew them perfectly and simply didn't care, picked those pieces up, held them to the light, and saw something everyone else had missed. She saw what they could become. To understand what Princess Diana did to the royal jewelry collection, you first have to understand the culture she walked into. In the British royal family, jewelry is not fashion. It is not personal expression. It is protocol. It is uniform. For centuries, queens and princesses wore what they were given, in the manner in which it was given, for the occasions for which it was intended. A brooch is a brooch. A necklace is a necklace. You do not remix the crown's inheritance. You do not experiment with history. Into this world came the Queen Mother's wedding gift to Diana in 1981. A pendant necklace featuring the heraldic badge of the Prince of Wales, 3 diamond-encrusted ostrich feathers, set with a remarkable emerald drop. The piece, according to jewelry historian Leslie Field in The Queen's Jewels, had extraordinary pedigree. The emerald pendant had originally been gifted to Princess Alexandra of Denmark when she married the future King Edward VII in 1863. For over a century, it had been part of the royal collection. The Queen Mother gave it to Diana as a necklace shortly after her engagement. It was a piece of deep symbolic meaning. After all, Diana was about to marry the Prince of Wales, and here was the very badge of that title rendered in diamonds and emeralds, given from the matriarch of the family to its newest member. It was a welcoming gift. It was also, unmistakably, a traditional one. In her early royal years, Diana wore the necklace as intended. We see photographs of her in the early 1980s with the emerald pendant resting against her collarbone, demure and correct. But Diana's eye for transformation was developing rapidly. By the mid-1980s, she had begun to understand something that no courtier had ever articulated. A piece of jewelry is not fixed. Its form is not its destiny. She was right about this in ways that even she may not have fully understood. As jewelry historian Vivian Becker has noted, the practice of reimagining royal jewelry has deep roots. Empress Josephine was doing it in the early 1800s, designing multi-purpose suites that could be worn as tiaras, necklaces, and bracelets. But in the rigid world of the 20th century British monarchy, this tradition had been largely forgotten. Diana remembered it. She took the Prince of Wales' feathers pendant and began wearing it suspended on the diamond chain from another gift, the extraordinary sapphire and diamond suite given to her as a wedding present by Crown Prince Fahd of Saudi Arabia in 1981. That suite, made by Asprey, was itself a marvel. A large Burmese sapphire pendant in a sunray fringe of baguette diamonds, hung on a solid chain of brilliant cut diamonds, accompanied by matching earrings, a ring, a bracelet, and a watch. The chain was designed to carry the sapphire pendant, but Diana realized it was also the perfect stage for the feathers emerald. By detaching one pendant and substituting another, she had created something the palace hadn't authorized and the courtiers hadn't imagined. A hybrid piece that combined 2 different gifts from 2 different sources into a single, harmonious statement. It was a quiet act of genius. But the transformation of the Queen Mother's gift was not finished. After Diana's death in 1997, the pendant returned to the royal collection. Years later it reappeared, but now as a brooch stripped of its pendant chain entirely, worn by Queen Camilla at the Cheltenham Festival in 2012. The piece has since been worn by the current Princess of Wales, Catherine, most recently at a state visit in 2025. According to fine jewelry expert Maxwell Stone of UK retailer Stephen Stone, the brooch features approximately 4 carats of white diamonds arranged in 18 individual stones, with deep symbolism at its heart. The 3 ostrich feathers represent the Prince of Wales title that Charles once held and William holds now. A necklace had become a pendant, which had become a brooch, a jewel that passed through 3 princesses in 3 different forms, each time reflecting something essential about the woman wearing it. Diana started that conversation. The sapphire and diamond suite from Saudi Arabia deserves its own chapter, because what Diana did with it over the course of 16 years represents perhaps the most sustained act of jewelry reinvention in modern royal history. The suite arrived in 1981 in a green malachite box decorated with a palm tree and crossed swords, the symbols of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Fahd had chosen the pieces specifically to complement Diana's sapphire engagement ring, the famous 12-carat Ceylon sapphire surrounded by 14 diamonds that she had herself selected from a Garrard catalog. The suite was made by Asprey and it was spectacular. An enormous pendant, matching earrings and ring, a 2-row diamond bracelet, and a diamond and sapphire wristwatch. In total, the collection is estimated to be worth approximately $20 million in today's valuations. In its original form, it was magnificent but somewhat formal. The pieces were clearly meant to be worn as a set, in the traditional manner. For the first years of her marriage, Diana wore them that way, at state receptions in Australia in 1983, at official engagements throughout the mid-1980s. The photographs are beautiful. She looks every inch a princess. But Diana could not leave well enough alone. And thank goodness for that. At some point in the late 1980s, Diana made a decision that would have bewildered the courtiers. She took the stones from the watch and the ring of the Saudi suite and used them to commission an entirely new piece of jewelry. The original watch and ring disappeared from public view. In their place emerged something new. The sapphires liberated from their original settings, repurposed into a creation entirely of Diana's own vision. This was not just reinterpretation. This was dismantlement in the name of rebirth. The concept was not without precedent in royal circles. Queen Mary famously cannibalized earlier pieces to create new ones, and the Spencer tiara itself was constructed largely from jewels given to Diana's grandmother Lady Cynthia Hamilton and remounted by Garrard in 1937. But those transformations happened in official channels, through authorized jewelers working at royal command. Diana's relationship to her jewelry was more intimate, more personal, more urgent. She wasn't building for posterity. She was dressing for Tuesday. What this tells us is something important about Diana's understanding of ownership. When the Queen received gifts, they typically entered a kind of collective inheritance, the royal collection, to be worn by queens and lent to princesses in perpetuity. Diana, by contrast, seems to have viewed the jewelry given to her personally as genuinely hers, to wear and alter as she saw fit. This was not ingratitude. It was confidence. It was the confidence of a woman who understood that stones are just stones until a human being gives them meaning. It is October 27, 1987. The Birthright Charity Gala is being held in London. Princess Diana steps out of a car in a royal purple gown by Catherine Walker, a high-collared Victorian-style creation in deep velvet that falls to the floor in a cascade of regal authority. Around her throat, suspended on a long rope of pearls, hangs a cross. Not a delicate cross. Not a modest, devotional pendant. This is the Atala cross, a sprawling, theatrical, almost aggressively ornate piece of gold and silver, studded with amethysts and diamonds, measuring approximately 136 by 95 millimeters. It was created by Garrard in the 1920s, in a Renaissance style that makes it look less like a piece of modern jewelry, and more like something a Medici duchess might have worn to intimidate her guests. It was not part of the royal collection. It was not a family heirloom. It had been purchased by the late Naim Atala CBE, the Palestinian-British businessman who served as group chief executive of Asprey and Garrard, who loaned it to Diana on multiple occasions throughout the 1980s. The Itala cross is one of the most fascinating jewels in Diana's story precisely because it represents something the palace would never have sanctioned. A piece of jewelry outside the royal collection, borrowed from a private individual, of a size and theatricality that bordered on the outrageous. You do not wear a cross the size of a dinner plate to a charity gala if you are trying to disappear. You wear it when you want the room to understand that you have arrived. Few people could carry this piece off, but Diana really could. Naeem Atala's son Ramsay said before the cross went to auction at Sotheby's London in 2023. He added that after his father's death, the cross had not been seen in public since Diana died, that no one else had ever worn it, that it had sat on the family's Christmas table as a centerpiece but never around a human throat. The memory of Diana wearing it was so vivid, so complete, that it seemed impossible for anyone else to inhabit it. Jewelry historian Vivian Becker, speaking to Vogue at the time of the auction, captured the essence of what Diana was doing with a piece like this. The size and impact of the cross, worn unusually on a long necklace, hinted at Madonna's 1980s star quality. Diana was not dressing like a princess. She was dressing like a pop star who happened to be a princess. She was mixing the sacred architecture of a Renaissance religious object with the stagecraft of celebrity culture, and making it feel, somehow, completely natural. The Itala cross sold at Sotheby's in January 2023 for £163,800, more than double its pre-auction estimate, to Kim Kardashian. As Sotheby's head of jewelry Christian Spofford observed, the piece had found a new lease of life within the hands of another globally famous name. The cross that no one wanted to wear after Diana was gone had finally found another woman brave enough to carry it. This is what Diana understood about bold jewelry. It does not belong to the careful. It belongs to the brave. Perhaps the most dramatic act of jewelry reimagination in Diana's entire repertoire, even more dramatic than wearing a choker as a headband, was the night she wore a tiara as a necklace. This story is less widely told, but it is documented in photographs and in the accounts of royal jewelry researchers. Diana took a diamond bandeau off its formal frame and looped it around her neck as a flexible collar of diamonds. It was a piece that sat firmly in the too formal for everyday wear category, the kind of stiff ceremonial headpiece that required white gloves and a receiving line to justify its existence. On Diana's neck it was fluid. It was modern. It was, once again, the act of a woman who looked at the function of an object and simply disagreed with it. This was not mere styling. It was a philosophical statement. A tiara is a crown, and crowns mean hierarchy, distance, elevation above the crowd. When Diana took a tiara off her head and brought it down to her neck, the most human, most vulnerable part of the body, she was collapsing the distance between royalty and person. She was saying with a single creative decision, that even the most elevated symbol of the monarchy could be brought down to earth, could be made warm, could be made human. It was, in its way, the whole story of Diana in a single gesture. As Natural Diamonds has documented, Diana developed a broad and consistent habit throughout the 1980s of turning tiaras into necklaces, breaking pieces down into pendants and clips, and generally treating the rigid vocabulary of royal jewelry as a set of raw materials rather than a fixed text. This tradition of transformation has roots stretching back to Empress Josephine, who in the early 19th century designed convertible suites specifically so that a single purchase could be worn in multiple configurations. Diana didn't know she was reviving a centuries-old practice. She was simply following her instinct. And her instinct, as it turned out, was historically impeccable. By 1996, Diana had been divorced from Prince Charles. The terms were clear, and they were brutal in their symbolism. She had to return the lover's knot tiara. The royal chokers and formal pieces that had been loaned to her during her marriage went back into the vault. The palace took back its diamonds. The woman who had animated those jewels, who had worn the choker as a headband, who had transformed the brooch into a pendant, who had carried the heavy tiara through years of pain to make it iconic, was left, in jewelry terms, to start again. What she did next was entirely her own. Diana commissioned a ring from Asprey. It was an emerald-cut aquamarine, large and bold, set as a cocktail ring of considerable size and presence. She wore it frequently in the final year of her life, and on at least one occasion, her son Harry's confirmation, she was photographed wearing it on her left ring finger, the finger where the sapphire engagement ring had once sat. No one who saw it missed the statement. Aquamarines were not, In the language of royal jewelry, serious stones. Diamonds and sapphires and rubies were for queens. Aquamarines were considered semi-precious. The stones of lesser occasions, lesser royals. Diana loved them precisely because of this. They matched her eyes. They matched her spirit. Clear, open, and oceanic. And now, freed from the weight of a title she had been stripped of, she wore one on the finger that had once carried the weight of the monarchy's most famous engagement ring. It was an act of replacement so quiet and so devastating that no press release could have communicated it more clearly. Prince Harry later gave the aquamarine ring to Meghan Markle, who wore it at the evening reception following their wedding in May 2018. The ring that Diana had bought for herself with her own money as a declaration of independence was now being passed to the newest woman to enter the family. It was a lesson transmitted through gemstone from one generation to the next about what it means to own your own story. Diana had made aquamarines cool. She had taken a stone the palace considered second tier and turned it into the symbol of a woman who didn't need anyone's permission to shine. The most poignant chapter in the story of Diana and jewelry is perhaps the one that closes it. In the final months of her life in 1997, Diana sat down with David Thomas, then the president of Garrard Jewelers, the house that had been the official crown jeweler for over 150 years, and designed something entirely from scratch. It was not a reimagining of something old. It was not a transformation of a gift from a queen or a foreign dignitary. It was entirely hers, the Swan Lake Suite. The necklace features 7 identical 12mm South Sea pearls, Diana's favorite gem. The stone she had worn throughout her royal life in every possible configuration, set in a collar of 178 marquise, and round-cut diamonds totaling 51 carats. The design is sweeping and architectural, a piece that moves like water, that looks like the moment just before a swan unfolds its wings. She wore it once, on June 3, 1997, to a gala performance of Swan Lake at the Royal Albert Hall. It was her last official public engagement before her death in Paris on August 31 of that year. She had ordered matching earrings. They weren't finished in time. The earrings were completed after her death. The suite, necklace and earrings together, was later offered at auction by Guernsey's, accompanied by the full story of its creation. Arlen Ettinger, president of Guernsey's, told WWD that Diana had been a girl when she was a princess, wearing borrowed material. Then she blossomed into a tower of strength and became very much her own. And designing a necklace was a statement for her. It was more than a statement. It was a declaration. The Swan Lake Suite represents everything Diana spent 16 years learning to do with jewelry. To wear it rather than be worn by it, to choose it rather than inherit it, to make it speak for the woman inside the title rather than for the title alone. It was the final act of a woman who had started her royal life wearing other people's choices and ended it designing her own. Princess Diana died on August 31, 1997. In her will, she left her personal jewelry collection to her 2 sons, William and Harry, with the expressed wish that the pieces be given to their future wives. It was characteristic of her. Generous, forward-thinking, and deeply personal. She wanted her stones to live. In the years since, the living has been extraordinary. William gave his mother's sapphire engagement ring to Catherine Middleton when he proposed in 2010, describing it as a way of making sure his mother didn't miss such an important occasion. Harry gave Meghan the aquamarine freedom ring, the diamond tennis bracelet, the butterfly earrings. Catherine has worn the 3-strand pearl bracelet, the one Diana wore with the famous pearl-encrusted Elvis dress in Hong Kong in 1989, to a Holocaust Memorial Day service in 2025. She has worn the Delhi Durbar emerald choker. She has open vaults that even Diana never touched, reviving pieces like the Strathmore Rose tiara, unseen for 100 years, and Queen Victoria's Oriental circlet, worn by Queen Elizabeth herself only once in her entire 70-year reign. The pieces that Diana had transformed, the Prince of Wales feathers necklace turned pendant turned brooch, the Saudi sapphires reimagined into new forms, continue to circulate, worn by women who carry the echo of Diana's choices in every clasp and setting. And the pieces Diana had borrowed, bought, or commissioned for herself have scattered like seeds into the world. The Italic cross now glitters in Kim Kardashian's collection. The Swan Lake Suite exists, its pearls still carrying the memory of the only night they were worn. What Diana understood, and what no queen before her had been permitted to fully act on, was that jewelry is not a museum. It is not a shrine. It is not a tomb. The best jewelry is alive. It needs a human being to give it its meaning, its story, its power. A diamond in a vault is just a rock. On the right woman, on the right night, with the right intention, it becomes a weapon, a poem, a revolution. She took the pieces the palace had deemed too heavy, too foreign, too awkward, too theatrical, too old, too loud, too much. She picked them up one by one, held them to the light, and gave them back to the world.